It started on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray-skied day where the clouds seemed glued to the tops of buildings and the air smelled like wet concrete. Jackson Miller had just gotten out of a meeting in Midtown Manhattan and was headed back to his apartment. He worked in architecture, the kind of job that had deadlines looming like thunderclouds and meetings that dragged longer than needed. The only thing on his mind was getting back, making a cup of tea, and sleeping off the headache that had been brewing behind his eyes since morning. Jackson entered the building he lived in, a tall, somewhat dated high-rise tucked between newer, glass-paneled towers. The lobby was quiet, the kind of eerie silence that made the click of his shoes feel louder than they should be. He waved to Tom, the night doorman, who only nodded from behind the security desk, eyes glued to a small black and white monitor. Jackson pressed the button for the elevator. It dinged after a short pause, and the doors slid open. He stepped inside and hit the button for the 21st floor, where his apartment was. He leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, letting the elevator hum lull him into a moment of peace. But after a few floors, something strange happened. The elevator slowed, then suddenly accelerated upward. The lights flickered once. Jackson opened his eyes. The digital panel above the door blinked erratically, skipping numbers. Then, it stopped at a floor labeled 44. There was no 44th floor in his building. He knew that for a fact. The building only had 30 floors, with a rooftop deck. He stepped forward cautiously, thinking maybe it was a malfunction. The doors opened with a quiet ding. What lay beyond wasn't a hallway. It was a dimly lit corridor, stretched long with old wallpaper peeling at the edges and dusty wall sconces that flickered with weak, yellow light. The air that spilled into the elevator was colder than it should have been. It smelled faintly of mothballs and something older, something rotten beneath the surface. Jackson hesitated. Maybe it was a maintenance floor? But he'd never seen or heard of this place before. Curiosity, like a whisper in the back of his mind, pushed him forward. He stepped out. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Jackson turned to look for a button panel on the wall. Nothing. Just that hallway, stretching endlessly. A soft, distant hum vibrated through the floor, like a machine running far below. He walked slowly, the carpet beneath his shoes crunching as though it hadn't been vacuumed in decades. Doors lined the corridor, each painted an identical muted green, with tarnished brass numbers, but the numbers didn't make sense. 4A, 9C, 2K, 7F. They weren't sequential. Some had no numbers at all, just blank plaques. He reached for one doorknob, but it was locked. The next, the same. Then he came upon a door that was slightly ajar. The number plate read 3M. Something about it felt off, like it had been waiting for him. He pushed it open. Inside was a small apartment, bathed in sepia light. The furniture looked old, like 1950s old, patterned sofa, rotary phone, black and white TV with wooden knobs. Dust floated in the still air. A single light bulb swung slowly from the ceiling. But what struck Jackson most was the smell, an old, lived-in smell, and a faint whiff of something burning. He moved further in. The walls were covered in yellowed photographs. One of the frames caught his eye. It showed a man who looked eerily like him, standing next to a woman in a polka-dot dress. But he didn't know her. He didn't remember taking the picture. Below it, scrawled in pen, Elliot and Marie, 1961. Jackson turned sharply. The door behind him creaked closed on its own. He hurried over and yanked it open, but the hallway outside was gone. In its place was a brick wall. Panic flared in his chest. He rushed to the window, thinking maybe he could see where he was, but outside was a dense fog. No city skyline. No streets. Just gray mist pressing up against the glass, like a living thing. The rotary phone rang. Jackson nearly jumped out of his skin. It rang again, sharp and shrill. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Hello." A crackled voice on the other end. "You shouldn't be here, Elliot." "My name isn't Elliot," Jackson replied, heart hammering. "Who is this?" Static. Then, softly, "Remember." The line went dead. Jackson stood there, stunned. The name Elliot echoed in his mind. He backed away from the phone and turned in time to see the photographs on the wall changing. They were no longer sepia-toned strangers. They were pictures of his childhood, his parents, his 10th birthday, a vacation to Lake George. Pictures he never remembered being taken. Then he heard footsteps coming from the hallway. But there was no hallway anymore. There was a knock on the apartment door. 3 soft taps. He didn't move. Another knock. More insistent. Slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Jackson backed into the kitchen, grabbing the nearest object he could find, a rusty butter knife. The door creaked open. But instead of someone walking in, the room flickered. The light bulb above him swung violently. The entire apartment began to shift, like reality had been bent slightly out of shape. And then, just like that, everything snapped back. The door was shut. The hallway had returned. Jackson didn't waste another second. He ran back into the corridor, breathing hard, searching for the elevator. But where it had been, there was now only another door. This one red, with a gold handle. It looked newer than the others. He opened it, and there it was, the elevator. He stepped inside and pressed lobby. The elevator didn't move. The panel flickered. Then slowly it began to descend. The numbers counted down from 44. But they didn't stop at 1. They kept going. -1, -2, -3. The air inside grew colder. Jackson's breath came out in small clouds. The lights dimmed. Then, suddenly, the elevator stopped. The doors opened. Before him was a sub-basement parking garage. Silent. Empty. Dripping water echoed in the distance. He stepped out, calling out for help, his voice bouncing back at him. No cars. No people. Just rows and rows of concrete pillars and shadows that moved when they shouldn't. One of the shadows detached itself, began to walk toward him. Jackson ran. His footsteps pounded across the wet floor. He turned a corner, found a stairwell, and took the stairs 2 at a time. Up and up. His legs burned, chest heaving, until he burst through a door labeled lobby. He was back. Tom, the doorman, looked up startled. Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Jackson looked behind him. The stairwell door closed. Nothing unusual. He walked past Tom without answering and stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but the city felt real again. Solid. He never told anyone about what happened. Not his coworkers. Not his friends. Not even his therapist. He avoided elevators for weeks, choosing stairs even in skyscrapers. But every now and then, when he had no choice but to ride one, he watched the floor numbers like a hawk. And sometimes, just sometimes, the elevator would pause, flicker, and for a breathless moment, he feared it would take him back to that place, that floor that shouldn't exist. But it never did. Until one night, a month later, Jackson stepped into the elevator of a different building. He was visiting a friend in Brooklyn. The building was new, modern, full of smart features and brushed steel. He pressed the button for the 12th floor.